The Louisiana Restaurant Association presents Conversations in the COVID Crisis, a special edition podcast to capture the stories of our industry during the most unprecedented of times. Now, here are your hosts, LRA President and CEO Stan Harris and Vice President of Communications, Wendy Warren.
Welcome to the 12th edition of our Conversations in the COVID Crisis. It's helpful for us to be able to have this type of format to share information as it occurs. As the governor shared with us as he was going through the decision to extend phase 2, that so many of us appear that we are done with the virus, and it is very clear that the virus is not done with us. One of the things that the governor shared with us recently with the Resilient Louisiana Commission and asked us to participate as members of the Restaurant Task Force is what data they are tracking that is guiding their decisions. And while he has extended his phase 2 order to July 28th, they will be reviewing and revisiting the information and data every 7 days. And if there is an opportunity for us to move to phase 3 based on the guidance documents and all of the occurrences, then we will address it that way. And there's a possibility we could move forward. But as he said in his final comment, we know that it's taking 14 days for these things to show up and be reported, whether it's a positive case or a hospitalization. And so in that case, we kind of know that right now we've got 4th of July on top of us. So it probably is somewhere in the neighborhood of the 15th to 16th, 17th of July before we see the impact.
Right.
But we did learn what they're tracing and following as far as their data points. And one is a word called syndrome surveillance, which is the number of people that are presenting to emergency or urgent care that have symptoms of COVID-19. They're also tracking the number of cases of COVID-19, new cases, and positive tests. And while for a while we were tracking favorably that the more testing we did, the lower the percentage of positives, that has trended now in the other direction. And then lastly are hospitalizations and being able to manage the hospital bed capacity. They feel like we've got adequate ventilator capacity right now, but they're concerned that with the number of elected procedures and non-emergency procedures that are underway right now, they want to manage their hospitalization. Right. So these are kind of all things that we never thought that a restaurant association or an industry would have to be playing in someone else's space, but public health is part of all of our responsibilities. And when we get down to it, it's about common sense and compliance. And early on when we were opening, there was a great deal of pent-up frustration and anxiety about getting open, and people were ready to open, and they would typically be willing to do anything to get open. And in phase 1, we were able to get restaurants open and bars that had LDH food service permits open. And in phase 2, we were able to get bars without LDH permits open. But that comes with responsibilities. As I remind people that you have an ATC permit, you have an LDH food service permit, you have an occupancy permit, and that's some of the things now that the State Fire Marshal, ATC, LDH, Office of Public Health and Sanitarian Services are going to be doing more robust compliance checks because we need to affect social distancing. In a bar setting or a congregate setting, we need to be effective crowd managing and doing things that we don't normally do because, we're social beings. We like to be together. You and I are sitting 8 feet apart at a table doing this when we would normally be sitting side by side. But it gets down to good sanitation, good hygiene, wearing a mask. And really, one of the comments that came to us today was our hospitality is really pivoting more to COVID courtesy. Yeah. I'm wearing a mask to take care of me, but I'd love for you to wear a mask to take care of you. Right. And, it's not always that we're with a group of people that we spend all of our time with.
Right.
So when we combine all of these different people into the gumbo that is Louisiana, we don't have any assurance that the people that are in the same room with us or at the table next to us are following the same hygiene and sanitation practices we are. I know that when I'm out, I'm wearing a mask most of the time. I know when I walk into a store, I'm always surprised. But, I've seen some stores that have marked off their aisleways to be only one way.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of staff compliance, but at the same time, there's certain practices that we just can't do right now. You can't have a self-service or customer service buffet. That has to stop. And I realize that, restaurants and retailers want the revenue from that, but they may not have the staff. Well, then you can't do it.
Right.
Because it says clearly in the guidelines that you can't allow the guests to serve that.
And one thing, I went into a place yesterday and they did have a buffet. They said, please use the gloves we have provided. But in a food service setting, we wash our hands before we put the gloves on, and then we wash our hands when we take them off. And we're not in a setting where we can do that in this environment right now. That's
right. And what we're supposed to do as the permittees are enhance compliance and encourage people to do the right thing. The governor made a great comment that the best way to recognize people is to do business with people that are compliant. Mm-hmm. And when you walk into a place of business that's not compliant, don't do business with them because they're not taking the appropriate steps to look out for your health and well-being. And that's what we're all supposed to be focused on right now.
And you've actually done that. You've walked in and turned around and walked right back out.
I've done it too many times to count. And when I speak to the operator, we're not Big Brother.
No.
We're not the compliance people. We're trying to set up an environment where they can operate safely. I spent a great deal of time the last 4 or 5 days with leadership from the governor's office, from the Office of Public Health, from the state fire marshal, from ATC, in discussing how they could implement more strict restrictions in phase 2 under what we're doing now. And I don't think that the average member has any understanding the access that we have, and at the same time, the weight that our opinion carries in how we carry out this policy. But the only way that we can continue to have that access and have that trust is if we have good outcomes.
Right.
And so what we've got to do is pay attention to this. From the same token that, it's a different experience. We had one of our member hotels here who's a high-end property was having guests that were really not happy to have buffet service that served to them when they wanted to do past hors d'oeuvres. And, I said, it's hard to explain to that guest that you've got a service person standing there out in the open. Mm-hmm. They may be wearing a mask and may have a guest come up that's not wearing a mask, that's breathing, sneezing, coughing, aspirating on the tray of food.
Right.
And while in a normal setting that turns over very, very quickly, this is not a normal setting.
No.
And people are going to have to embrace the fact that wedding receptions are going to be different. Mm-hmm. And when you say, even under this guidance, they've reduced the size of a group to 250, which has really kind of hurt us because we're trying to plan our trade show. We're trying to know what happens in phase 3. Will we be able to move to having 1,000 people in a room? We don't know. But we know that if the virus is still as active as it appears right now, we're going to have effective social distancing of 6 feet or so. We're probably going to have the mask for the showcase this time. And so that's a sponsor opportunity we can pitch today.
Anybody interested?
Yeah. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at. But just the conversations that I know that you're having and that I know that I have regularly with members today about an employee who tests positive or someone how do they deal with this? And we remind them that there's no guidance from LDH or anything else that says they have to close their business.
Right.
It's always good to have deep sanitation and cleaning, but that ultimate decision on closing is up to the operator.
And it's mainly because when they're exposed, when they have someone exposed, they don't have enough people to stay open.
Yeah, their staffing pressure is difficult right now. And because of this outbreak that we've seen really since Memorial Day and as summer has, and the bars have opened up under phase 2, and just non-compliance, quite frankly.
Right.
The pressure has gone up on all of the providers. LDH has a great site you can go to your parish and find out where they're testing. Today there's testing in St. Tammany, where I live, at one of the urgent care clinics, and they're doing rapid tests if you're insured, or they'll take cash, or you can, if Medicare or Medicaid. But, we tested all of our employees here at the LRA when we stood our office back up. And yes, it's a one point in time test, but it's a big psychological piece of getting people to understand that we're going to do the right thing. But our members need us to be here to do the work and collaborate and be part of representing the industry. We do a number of calls. I've done probably 5 or 6 calls with members today on most of them, believe it or not, are about how do we get more people to be compliant, because those are the folks that join associations that are wanting to follow best practices. And then those that are trying to show the care for their employees and their guests to try to figure out how to do it. And I said, you walk into a restaurant and you see a basket full of wrapped masks that are available if a guest wants to wear one. That's a good practice. Put it right next door to the hand sanitizer. Doing those kinds of things. Hanes Clothing was nice enough to give us tens of thousands of masks. We got them from Mayor Cantrell in New Orleans. We got them from Ochsner and from the administration in Jefferson. And we have distributed them to members in Jefferson and Orleans Parish. I carry some in my vehicle.
I have them everywhere. They're on every doorknob in my house.
Absolutely. And
in case I forget.
When I take them off, I spray them down with Lysol. I wash them all once a week and put them back into service for me. So it's just, getting these types of approaches, it's very, very different. We used to do ink pens and coffee mugs, and maybe now we're going to have to do more masks and things like that, and lots of hand sanitizer. But we've got an opportunity here to show the best of Louisiana. We've got the opportunity for us to come together as an industry and show that we are part of what we have always been, which is public health and food safety and caring for our guests, but also caring for the well-being of our frontline workers and those people who are coming in every day to deliver that service. And people have to make a choice in where they spend their money, and people have a choice really in where they want to work today, because employment is abundant in the industry if you're willing to drive and go to that. Now we're going to have a tremendous impact over the next 30 to 45 days as the federal unemployment dollars wears out and stops at the end of July. And there's no replacement for it right now, because Congress is only in session another couple of weeks for the summer, as then they focus toward re-election. The whole congressional delegation for Louisiana is up for election, plus one of our senators, Bill Cassidy. So we've got a different approach, and we've got to tackle this head on, just like we did when we were trying, as I said when you and I were talking yesterday, trying to remind people that we have another phase. Let's get focused on how we did when we were trying to get in phase 1, and everyone was being so careful. We need the same level of careful. We need the same level of control. We need the same level of consistency, and most of all, we need the same level of compliance. And if we do those things, then hopefully 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, we'll be moving to phase 3 and moving on to this recovery. Because to see to Texas and to see Florida close bars and roll back their approach to this, that means that they're getting stress in their hospital system, and they're not able to take care of the demand, and they don't want to overwhelm it. And let's face it, those are our neighbors. It's where we go to vacation. We have family members there. We have people that are close to us. So we need to stay as aware of that as possible.
And because we're in a position where we're seeing, we have bars that can open, they are pulling back on restrictions in these surrounding states. They may be coming here.
Yeah, and Florida and Texas were checking Louisiana cars and things, and it's a bad reflection. But it's also a reminder to people that this has a long incubation period.
Yes.
And we had a member restaurant in Baton Rouge earlier last week that had a positive test, but the positive test really didn't come from their restaurant. It came from an employee who worked at another restaurant, whose brother worked at their restaurant, whose roommate worked at this restaurant. And a lot of people live communally, and they share apartments, and they have roommates, because whether they're in college or they're in transition in life, 3 or 4 people live together. They may work at 4 restaurants. Some of them may have an extra job at another restaurant or work at a retail store. So all of a sudden, you've put that community spread out very, very quickly, and it looks like it's bubbling up. But, we've seen photographs on social media of people not being compliant, not social distancing, not wearing masks. And the folks who are really more careful, and probably some of our better spenders, they're just going to wait and spend their money when it's safer.
It's true.
They're going to eat more at home. They're going to do more takeout. They're going to do more delivery. And all of those things are ways to help our restaurant and hospitality community survive. But we've got to figure out, our economy depends on visitors. Our economy depends on activities like fairs and festivals and trade shows and concerts and sporting events. And if we don't have that, and we don't have any demand for that, it's going to be a long, hard road to recover.
It is.
And we'll continue to do what the LRA has always done, is put the needs of our members and our industry in the forefront. And remember, we've got great resources for PPE and other things. So if you run into a jam, check our website. We've got all that information available to you.
Up next on the podcast is our State Fire Marshal, Butch Browning. How are you doing, Butch?
I'm doing well. How are y'all doing? I know in these strange times, there's a lot of questions and a lot of people just scrambling. So I guess I'm here to help you fix those problems.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us. I know you're extremely busy, busier than you've ever been in your whole life. And I want you to tell us what you feel is the State Fire Marshal's role in the COVID crisis right now.
The Fire Marshal's goal, and listen, we're an agency, since I've been there in 2008, we've been rich in helping people, rich in bringing about safety, but also standing up for economic development. And that's our role. So, we stand for that. We stand to interpret the guidelines as they're given to us. Just these guidelines are more about public health than fire safety and building safety.
Right.
But we know how to do it. So we're working hard every day, and I need to hear from industries and people who have special problems and what their best practices are. I mean, the National Restaurant Association certainly published some great guidelines that we used. What you all did in the state, publishing what you did, those things were all very helpful in what we have today at this 50% of a restaurant with social distancing. And like I said, I mean, I think the restaurants are doing a fine job, but like any business, I mean, they need support. I mean, they need our help to help them make things better. And that's just what we're going to do.
Well, at the very beginning of this event, this COVID crisis, we were working from home, and I looked at my husband and I said, I have greatly underestimated the role of the fire marshal. I knew y'all existed and I kind of knew what y'all did, but I really, when you guys became the point people for this event, not only, taking what you guys know about fire safety and capacity and building safety, and then using that knowledge and applying it to this particular set of circumstances. I was just, I even told Stan, I was like, my God, how did I know all of this existed?
And let me tell you why it worked well, because, again, we got a great relationship with designers and contractors and business owners because they've dealt with us in the past. So there, there's kind of a partnership or an understanding that already existed. Yeah. And that's why I always thought that it was important that we took on that role to be that communicator on this part of it. And you're right, it really has worked well. Again, I mean, I talk to people on the phone all day long, and it's conversations like you and I are having. People are wanting to know what to do. They don't view us as trying to shut them down. And in fact, I'll tell you, much of our work of specifically going to businesses and trying to practically, design their floor plan based on the standards, have allowed businesses to operate in a larger fashion than what they might have been able to do because they misinterpreted guidelines or didn't understand it. Because, again, there's no textbook. We're creating the standards every day.
Well, as Stan said, we're building the plane while we're flying in it.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And I'm like, man, this started out as a paper airplane.
I'm ready for this plane to land and be retired.
I hear that. I was like,
it is. I mean, and all I've ever been through in my 35 years, from hurricanes to floods and terrorist attacks, you name it. I mean, I never would have thought this medical public health emergency would be something that could do what it's done. Certainly in our state and our country, because it's amazing, how it's really just took us over. I never thought anything could ever do that, and but I'm proud of our role, and it makes us stand taller to get businesses back open and help these businesses be successful, and we're going to do that to the best of our ability.
Thank you so much for taking time with us, Mr. Fire Marshal. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Louisiana restaurants are open and ready to serve you. This is Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. Satisfy your cravings with world-famous Louisiana seafood. All the flavors you love, prepared by our world-famous chefs, and fresh from our bountiful waters to your plate. So head over to your local favorite restaurant and be sure to ask for authentic Louisiana seafood. Brought to you by the Louisiana Restaurant Association and Louisiana Seafood Board. A perfect pair.
Thank you for listening to the LRA's Conversations in the COVID Crisis. If you have a story idea, email communications@lra.org. Visit www.lra.org for the latest on COVID-19 resources for restaurateurs. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Until next time, stay safe, everybody. And remember, we at the LRA are working harder than ever for Louisiana's restaurant industry.